Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and unravel what is honestly one of the most relatable, yet scientifically baffling behaviors of the human body. I'm talking about crying. We all do it. We cry when our hearts are broken, when we're absolutely overwhelmed with joy, or even when some random nostalgic movie scene just completely wrecks us. But despite how incredibly universal this is, the actual underlying science behind why we leak water from our faces has been a massive biological mystery for centuries. Today, we're going to look at some truly groundbreaking new research that is literally rewriting what we know about this everyday phenomenon. So let's start with a really provocative mystery. Think about this for a second. Humans are the only species on the entire planet that shed emotional tears. Countless animals produce tears to protect and lubricate their eyeballs, right? But absolutely none of them cry liquid tears purely out of sadness or frustration or awe. For a long, long time, if you looked at this through the lens of pure survival and natural selection, crying when you're upset made absolutely zero evolutionary sense. To set the stage here, we really need to understand that the human body actually makes three distinct types of tears. First, you've got basal tears. That's your constant, invisible maintenance crew keeping your eyes moist. Then you have reflex tears. Those flood the eye to flush out physical irritants, think dust, or, the classic sting of a chopped onion. And finally, we have emotional tears. And get this, human infants actually start out just crying vocally to survive, screaming to get their parents' attention. They only develop these emotional liquid tears weeks later when their tear glands fully mature. Now, the difference between these last two is absolutely wild. Structurally, reflex tears and emotional tears are pretty similar. They're both a mix of water, oils, mucus, and antibacterial proteins. But the trigger? Totally different. Reflex tears flush out your eyes in response to a physical threat. Emotional tears, on the other hand, are seemingly designed to flush out your feelings. When we experience really deep emotion, specific parts of our brain literally signal cells in the brainstem to just turn on the biological faucet. So who exactly is doing all this crying? Well, according to the folks over at ZME Science, the frequency of crying varies a lot across different populations, acting as a kind of social glue. Globally speaking, women tend to cry roughly 2 to 3 times as often as men, and this disparity really kicks off in adolescence. It's heavily influenced by this complex mix of empathy levels, deep-seated societal norms, the whole boys need to be tough thing, and actual biology. Specifically, hormones like testosterone, which can literally suppress the crying mechanism itself. Let's take a quick step back through history to see how we got to our current understanding, because it leads right up to a massive misconception by one of science's absolute heavyweights. Back in antiquity, the ancient Greeks believed the mind just sort of triggered tears, or that emotions literally heated up the heart to produce vapor that condensed near your eyes. Wild, right? It wasn't until 1662 that a Danish scientist named Niels Stensen discovered the lacrimal gland, finally tracing tears to a real physical source. And that paved the way for the 19th century studies of Charles Darwin, the famous father of evolutionary biology. And here is where the story takes a really fascinating turn. Darwin famously dismissed emotional crying. He called it a purposeless evolutionary quirk. He watched people weep and concluded it was just an incidental result, basically just a byproduct of your facial muscles scrunching together when you're distressed, which ends up squeezing tears out of the glands. He honestly thought it offered zero real survival advantage. But as modern science is about to show us, there is a massive plot twist, and it turns out Darwin completely missed an invisible mechanism at play. Okay, so here's the crucial takeaway. Darwin was wrong. A recent, utterly groundbreaking study published in the journal PLOS Biology proved that emotional tears are highly functional. In fact, they found that sniffing human emotional tears actively reduces human male aggression by a staggering 43.7%. Just let that sink in for a second. A liquid we basically thought was just a useless byproduct of being sad actually cuts aggressive behavior almost in half. How on earth is that even possible? Welcome to the chemosignal plot twist. To figure this out, scientists actually looked at rodents. Down in the animal kingdom, tears are widely used as social chemical signals. For instance, subordinate blind mole rats will literally cover themselves in their own tears to stop dominant males from attacking them. Female mouse tears contain a liquid that totally abolishes intermale aggression. So, taking a page out of the rodent playbook, researchers hypothesized that human tears might secretly be hacking the brains of the people around us through our sense of smell. Now, how do you even test a hypothesis like that on humans? Well, the researchers designed a quirky, but honestly brilliant experiment. First, they collected actual emotional tears from female donors who were put in isolation to watch sad movies.
As a control, they trickled saline down the exact same women's cheeks just to capture any random skin oils, keeping the test perfectly balanced. Next, male participants were brought in to blindly sniff either the tears or the saline. Finally, these guys played a validated psychological test called the point subtraction aggression paradigm. Basically, it's an incredibly frustrating video game where a fake opponent unfairly steals the player's money, and the player gets a chance to seek revenge by deducting money from the opponent, even though they gain nothing from doing it. It's the perfect way to measure reactive aggression.
What makes this experiment so fascinating is what happened when the researchers asked the men to rate what they were sniffing. Both the trickled ceiling control and the emotional tears were rated identically for pleasantness, intensity, and familiarity. The guys literally couldn't tell the difference. The tears had absolutely zero conscious smell. Yet, entirely beneath the threshold of conscious perception, those tears were secretly transmitting a highly potent chemical message straight into their nervous systems. And the results from that frustrating video game? Completely undeniable. When they looked at the aggression-provocation ratio, which is basically how often the men went out of their way to seek revenge, the men who sniffed the saline control clocked in with a high ratio of 1.67. But for the men who sniffed the emotional tears, that number plummeted all the way down to 0.94. Nearly half of their aggressive, revenge-seeking behaviors just vanished, all because they caught an invisible, totally imperceptible whiff of salt water from another human's face.
Section 1. Inside the brain. Let's look at exactly how invisible chemicals rewire aggression. So, rodents detect these tear signals using a specialized accessory olfactory system, which, fun fact, humans don't actually have. So, how are we picking up the signal? Well, researchers tested 62 human man olfactory receptors in a petri dish, and they found out that 4 specific receptors in our noses still light up and activate in a dose-dependent manner when exposed to this odorless signal. That means our primary sense of smell is structurally hardwired to detect human tears.
To see what this looks like in action, they put these guys inside an fMRI brain scanner while they played that frustrating game. And we can see a literal chain reaction happening in real time. When the men were provoked, the brain's reactive aggression centers, specifically the prefrontal cortex and the left anterior insular cortex, actually started powering down if they had sniffed the tears. At the exact same time, the neural connectivity between that left anterior insula and the right amygdala, which is a major hub for smell and emotion, measurably increased. The tear signal is literally telling the brain to stand down and de-escalate. The big overarching takeaway here is a concept that researchers are dubbing the chemical blanket. Crying isn't just a visual cue or some vocal cry for help. It acts like an invisible chemical shield that protects vulnerable individuals. Think about a tiny infant or someone in deep distress who can't use words or physical force to defend themselves. Evolution actually gave us a mammalian-wide mechanism to broadcast a stealthy chemical signal that actively disarms the aggression of the people around us. Realizing that a seemingly purposeless biological leak, something Darwin himself totally dismissed, is actually this highly complex, behavior-altering chemical signal, well, it completely shifts how we view human interaction. We are constantly absorbing invisible data from the people around us, all day long. So, I'll leave you with this. If a single, odorless tear can cut a person's aggression in half, what other invisible messages is your brain secretly broadcasting? And who is your body secretly influencing right now?
Wow, we're already at the end of the video. Come on, watch other fun videos too. And don't forget to click subscribe to the BrainBubble channel.